Hey guys, in today's lecture, we'll be discussing the tale of King Vikramaditya of Ujjain and Vedal, a spirit. Now, originally, these tales belonged to Vedala Panchavimshati, which was a Sanskrit text. And it is also known as Betal Panchasi in Hindi, and it means 25 tales of Betal. It is a collection of tales and legends from India, and what is peculiar about this narrative is that it is a frame story. Now, what is the meaning of a frame story? As a literature student, you must know the meaning of frame story as well. Frame story means tales in which there is a story within a story. Now, if you have ever read the Thousand and One Nights or the Arabian Nights, you might know what a frame story is. There is the grand narrative which is recounted by Scheherazade. There is the story of Scheherazade, a woman who gets married to a misogynistic husband. And then there are the tales that the Scheherazade tells, right? There are the wonderful and marvelous tales that are recounted by Scheherazade, containing jinns and prince and princesses. So it is a frame narrative, which means that there is a story within a story. So our Vikramaditya tales too are constructed in such a way that it can be considered as a frame story, where there is a story within a story within a story. So, the basic story is that of King Vikramaditya, who was the king of Ujjain, and how he once met a sage. And there are many retellings of this tale. In some in some stories, it is written that in some retellings, it is written that King Vikramaditya came across a merchant, and in some tales it is written that a King Vikramaditya came across a beggar, and there are many retellings of the tale, because that's how tales were written at that time. Because especially folk tales, you cannot say that one version of the story is true, because there are many versions to the story. So in all these versions, there is a king named Vikramaditya, and he lived in a state called Ujjain, and he ruled over the state called Ujjain, and it was near to the river Godavari. So these were the basic details that are always there in the tale. And then there is the tale of how he goes deep into a forest which is near to a crematorium, where he is supposed to bring back a spirit from the forest, and the spirit is hanging from a tree. So all these basics are there in almost all the tales and all the retellings of the story of Vikram and Vedal. So എല്ലാ റീറ്റെല്ലിങ്സിലും ഈ ബേസിക് എലിമെൻസ് ഒക്കെ സെയിം ആയിട്ടുണ്ടായിരിക്കും. ദറ്റ് ഈസ് ദർ ഇസ് എ കിങ് നെയ്മഡ് വിക്രമാദിത്യ, ആൻഡ് ഹീ ഗോസ് ഇൻ ടു ദ ഫോറസ്റ്റ് to bring back a spirit named Vedal. So all the basic things will be there. But other than that, there were many retellings of the tale. As I said, 25 tales were told by Vedal, and the retellings of this tale can be found in the 12th book of Kada Sarit Sagara. Now, Kada Sarit Sagara, also known as Ocean or the Stream of Stories, Ocean of the Stream of Stories, is a work which is again written in Sanskrit. It was compiled in the 11th century by a writer named Somadeva. But there are even older materials in which the story of Vikramaditya and Vedal appears. For example, there were two major retellings, both in Sanskrit, which were made by Shivadasa and Jambaladatta. So, in both these retellings, again the story is there of that of a king and that of Vedal, and how the Vedal recounts 24 tales. Now, Vedala Panchasi, or 25 tales of Vedal, consist of 25 tales chronicling the adventures of King Vikramaditya and how his wits are pitted against a Vedal and a sorcerer. Now, a sorcerer has asked King Vikramaditya to capture a spirit named Vedal. Now, Vedals have great wisdom and insight into the human soul, in addition to being able to see the past and the future. So, Vedals can be considered as equivalent to our modern day clairvoyant. Now, you see, clairvoyants can see through the past, present, and the future. And since Vedals have the ability and the wisdom and the insight to see directly into the human soul, and they can know the past, the present, and the future, they were considered as valuable acquisitions by wise men. So, the wise men were in hunt of them. Because if you have a Vedal with you, then he would tell you the past, the present, and the future. Now, this particular Vedal of the story inhabited in a tree, in a crematorium or a graveyard, and the only way that it could be captured was by standing still and completely silent. Now, in some versions, it is said that the person can move, but the person should remain silent throughout. That is, from the place from which the Vedal is taken or acquired, that is from the tree, till the point of return, they should remain silent. That is, whoever is in pursuit of the Vedal should remain completely silent. Now, this is impossible, right? Because every time the king or Vikramaditya tried to get Vedal, the Vedal would tempt him with a story that ended with a question. Now, the king is a wise man, and for him, if somebody asks him a question, he has the urge to answer it, right? So the king has this tendency to answer, and he couldn't resist answering to Vedal's tale. And what eventually happened was that the Vedal would re-inhabit the tree, and the king was again left to try again. So each time the king went to get Vedal, Vedal would tell the king a story. Vedal would tell Vikramaditya a tale. And at the end of the tale, Vedal would ask Vikramaditya a question. Now, Vikramaditya, being a wise man, would always come up with an answer. And since he speaks to give out the answer, Vedal would go back to the tree. And it became a chore for him, for Vikramaditya, to go and collect Vedal from the tree. I'm sure that you might know this tale. But then again, Vedal told 25 tales. So it took 25 tales to defeat King Vikramaditya. So only after relating 25 tales does the Vedal allow the king to bear him back to the sorcerer. That is why our text or the collection of tales is termed as Vedal Panchasi. Panchasi meaning 25 tales told by Vedal. Now, in some versions of the tale, the Vedal knows about the sorcerer, and the Vedal warns the king that the sorcerer would eventually kill Vikramaditya if they returned. Because Vikramaditya is a person who possesses 32 virtues. So, Vikramaditya is a person who possesses 32 virtues, and the sorcerer is not really in hunt of Vedal, but he is really in hunt of Vikramaditya. The moment he comes back with Vedal, because Vikramaditya is the only person who can bring Vedal to the sorcerer. So the moment he comes back with Vedal, the sorcerer was trying to kill King Vikramaditya, and he was trying to behead King Vikramaditya and thereby acquire supremacy over the world. So that is what the sorcerer was planning, and Vedal knew about it. And Vedal advises the king to ask the sorcerer how to pay his respect to the goddess. And once the sorcerer shows him how to pay respect to the goddess, at that opportune time, the king would behead him and thereby save his skin. That was Vedal's plan of escaping from the sorcerer. But the moment Vikramaditya does this, Vikramaditya also asks Vedal for a boon. Now, what is the boon? To bring back the sorcerer back to life, because every person deserves a second chance. So this is the tale. In some versions, it is said that it was Lord Indra who granted the boon to Vikramaditya because of seeing his endurance and his wisdom. As I said, these are all retellings of the tale. Now, You can say that since this text existed way before Arabian Nights, even Arabian Nights might have had its influences from this text, because Arabian Nights came later, and it can be said that this tale might have influenced the frame narrative form in Arabian Nights as well. So, enough with the introduction, let's begin the tale. The story of Padmavathi and Prince Vajramukthi. Carrying Betal on his shoulders, Vikram started walking towards the cremation ground while the narration of another story began. So, this is how the tales begin. Each time the king answers a question, the Bedal goes back to the tree, and King Vikramaditya has to carry him back, and he has to move towards the cremation ground again. And each time he carried Vedal, Vedal would narrate or recount a tale. So another story began. The prince of Kashi, Vajramukthi, and the minister's son were best of friends. Now, this is again a trope which is used in Indian folk tales. Often, the prince, the crown prince, and the minister's son would be friends, because the minister's son would be wise, and he would be providing counsel for the future king. They used to be together all the time and shared everything in life. Once, Prince Vajramukthi and his friend went for hunting. There in a garden, the prince saw few beautiful girls playing blindfold. Now, what do you mean by blindfold? Kannu putti kalikam. So once they went to a garden and they saw a few girls playing blindfold. The girl who was blindfolded struck Vajramukthi. So the girl who was blindfolded, since she couldn't see anything, she struck Vajramukthi. She thought that Vajramukthi was also playing with her. So she struck Vajramukthi by mistake. As soon as she opened the fold, Vajramukthi asked what her name was, where she was from, and what her father's name was. So again, Vajramukthi is a quick-witted person, right? Though he is a prince, he is demanding 3 questions from her. The first question is, what was her name? The second question was, where is she from? And the third question was, what was her father's name? So again, a quick-witted prince who asked 3 questions immediately. That's how the dating begins in those days. So he asked her 3 questions. What her name was, where was she from, and who was her father? At this, the girl gave him 3 hints. Now, our girl, or the princess, or I'm not sure whether she's a princess, but again, the girl whom she met was a wise one. She gave him 3 hints. അങ്ങനെ വെറുതെ പറഞ്ഞാലൊന്നും പേര് പറയുന്ന ഒരു ലേഡി ആയിരുന്നില്ല. She gave him 3 hints. She picked up the lotus flower and kept it on her chest, hinting that it was her name. So she picked up a lotus flower, kept it on her chest, hinting that it was her name. Then she took out her earrings and put it on her ankle. So ചെവിയിൽ കിടക്കുന്ന ഇയറിങ്സ് എടുത്തിട്ട് she put it on her ankle. Ankle means കാൽപാദത്തിൻ്റെ അടുത്തായിട്ട് വയ്ക്കുക. So she put it on her ankle and indicated that that's the name of a place, the place in which she lived. That is the name of the town in which she lived. Lastly, she made a sign of plucking out teeth, hinting that that was the profession of her father. Now, that has gone to extremes. Now, she was hinting that what her name was by placing a lotus on her chest. Okay, that was acceptable. Second time, she placed an earring on her ankle. Now, it becomes a bit weird. A woman places her earrings on her ankle to indicate where she lived. And thirdly, she plucks out a tooth and then presents it before him. So it's an outrageous act, right? Plucks out teeth and hinting that that's the profession of her father. So you might have noticed how she plucks out her teeth and places it before him, hinting what her father's profession is. So since she is plucking out her teeth, it becomes quite evident that her father's profession was that of a dentist, right? So were you able to guess the other 2 hints? So she hints her name, right? So the prince was not able to understand any of these hints, as usually the prince never understands any of the hints that are given by women. After coming back, he told his friend about this, and the friend, again being a minister's son, he knew all the diplomacy, so he knew the answers as well. He was a wise person. The friend solved the riddle immediately, saying that the first hint meant that her name was Padmavathi. So, since she placed a lotus close to her chest, it meant that her name was Padmavathi. The second hint meant that she was from Karnapur. She was from Karnapur. That is why she kept an earring near to her ankle. Karnapur. And the third hint meant that her father was a dentist. Now, the third hint meant that her father was a dentist. She plucked her teeth, right? So, it meant that her father was a dentist. Vajramukthi and his friend went in disguise to search Padmavathi in Karnapur. They met an old lady who asked them to stay in her place or at her place. So they met an old lady. They went straight to Karnapur, and there they met an old lady, and the old lady asked them to stay at her place. When she asked them if they knew anybody in town, Vajramukthi said that they knew Padmavathi. At this, the old lady said that she was the midwife of Padmavathi and that she was appointed by her father to take care of Padmavathi since her mother died when she was young. So they have met the right person, right? This old lady was the caretaker of Padmavathi. She was the midwife, that is the woman who tends to childbirth. So she was the midwife of Padmavathi's mother, and she was the midwife of Padmavathi, which meant that she tended to her mother at the time in which her mother was giving birth to her. And since her mother died at a very young age, it was this midwife who took care of Padmavathi, and Padmavathi's father appointed the midwife as a caretaker to Padmavathi. The old lady then went and told Padmavathi that the prince whom she had met while playing blindfold had arrived and wanted to meet her. Padmavathi's friends told her to meet him, but she wanted the prince to solve one more puzzle or one more hint. And what was that? So she applied sandalwood paste with 4 of her fingers on the lady's cheek and asked her to go. So that's what she did. She applied sandalwood paste in 4 of her fingers, and she placed it on the lady's cheek and asked the old lady to go, carrying the marks of the sandalwood paste on her cheeks. Now, in some retellings, it was said that Padmavathi slapped the old lady across the face. So there are again different retellings to the story. So in some retellings, it said that she slapped her across the face using the sandalwood paste. So again, this has some meaning to it. We shall discuss it again. When the old lady came back and told the prince about the puzzle, he could not solve it, but his friend solved it, saying that after 4 days in moonlight, she would meet him. So again, it was a friend who solved the puzzle. The friend said that after 4 days of moonlight, the lady would meet him. That is the meaning of placing 4 fingers on the old lady's face. So after 4 days of or after 4 days in moonlight, she would meet him. Now this again has another connotation to it. You know, moonlight and 4 days, it indicates her menstrual cycle. So maybe Padmavathi was menstruating at that time, and that's why she placed, not maybe, this is the real reason. She was menstruating at that time. That's the reason why she placed 4 fingers on sandalwood paste and placed it on the old woman's cheek to indicate that you may meet me after 3 days or after 4 days of moonlight. After 4 days, the prince went to meet her. His friend was waiting for him, but for 3 days he did not turn up, so he grew impatient. So for 3 days, the prince had fun with Padmavathi. Just then he saw a few guards pulling a lady. He asked the old lady as to why they were doing this, and she said that the law in their town was that any girl who was doubted of loose character was thrown out. So it is hinted that Padmavati and the prince might have started a relationship. And at that time, again, the minister's son, or our prince's friend, came across an incident. And what was the incident? A young lady was dragged out of the town, and uh, our minister's son inquired about the what was going on, inquired about the incident, and he got a reply that they said that if a woman is being doubted of having a loose moral or a loose character, if a woman is doubted of being as characterless, she would be thrown out of the city, and this was their norm. Later, the friend went back to get the prince Vajramukthi. Just when they were about to leave, Padmavati's father declared that he cannot get Padmavati married to Vajramukti because the king of their state wanted to marry her and he could not refuse him as he was very arrogant. Now, again, here we see that the woman does not have an agency over whom she chooses to marry. The father said that Padmavati is destined to marry the king of their state, because the king of their state had already asked her hand on marriage, and at this point he cannot turn back because the king himself was a very arrogant person. He was a very stubborn person and he couldn't change the king's mind. Vajramukti did not want to go, leaving Padmavati behind. So Vajramukti truly loved Padmavati, so he did not want to go, leaving her behind. So his friend thought of a plan. He went and stole Padmavati's jewelry at night, and the next day he went to sell it in disguise of a yogi. He was taken to the king for this, as Padmavati's jewelry was recognized. On being asked by the king, the friend narrated a fake story that Padmavati came to interrupt his prayers with her beauty, and she was of loose character. See how intelligent the minister turned out to be. How the intelligent the minister's son turned out to be, because again, he wanted to solve the issue. He wanted to make Vajramukti marry Padmavati, but there was no way out. So what he did was that he wanted in some way to unite the lovers, and what he did was that he stole some jewelry, or he asked Vajramukti to take some jewelry from Padmavati. So he went and he stole the jewelry from Padmavati at night, and in the very next day he went to sell it in the form of a yogi. Now, if it is a yogi, then it is a austere person, right? A person who is an ascetic. He won't be interested in love affairs. So again, he chose the attire of a yogi. ഒരു യോഗിയുടെ രൂപത്തിൽ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ യോഗി ഈസ് കൺസിഡേർഡ് ടു ബി ഒരു നൈതികനായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരാളായിട്ടാണ്, ഒരു ബ്രഹ്മചര്യമൊക്കെ ഉള്ള ഒരാളായിട്ടാണ് യോഗിമാരെ കൺസിഡർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സോ അഗൈൻ ദാറ്റ്സ് വൈ ഹി ചൂസ് ദി ഗാർബ് ഓഫ് എ യോഗി, ആൻഡ് ഹി വെൻറ്റ് ആൻഡ് tried to sell these jewelry of Padmavati. And since Padmavati was the love interest of the king and the people in the city immediately recognized this jewelry as that belonging to Padmavati. So he was asked about how he got the jewelry, and he said that Padmavati came to him to interrupt his prayers with her beauty. And he declared that this woman was of a loose character. She has a loose character because donning the garb of a yogi, our minister's son said that Padmavati came to him to interrupt his prayers. അതായത് തൻ്റെ തപസ് ഇളക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് പത്മാവതി തൻ്റെ ബ്യൂട്ടിയൊക്കെ ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ട് തൻ്റെ മുന്നിലോട്ട് വന്നു എന്നാണ് യോഗിയുടെ വേഷം ധരിച്ച നമ്മുടെ മന്ത്രിപുത്രൻ പറഞ്ഞത്. The king called for Padmavati, and as per the law of the state, ordered for her to be thrown out of the state. So once the king came to know that Padmavati was having a loose character, he immediately ordered the made a law. He followed the law of the state, and he immediately followed the law of the state, and he ordered Padmavati to be thrown out of the state. When she came out of the state, Prince Vajramukti was waiting for her, and they both met. This way, she was saved from marrying the king. Now, again, this is a very peculiar situation. A woman is branded as having a loose character. Immediately, the king follows the law of the land and banishes her from the kingdom. And the woman here is happy because she never wanted to marry the king, and she is happy that she could finally marry Vajramukti now. But Bedal, at the end of the tale, asked our Vikramaditya a question. Now let's move on to that part. After this, Bedal, as usual, asked a question to Vikram as to who was at fault, the friend, the prince, or the king. So, who was at fault here? Who can be considered as of having a fault here? Was it the friend, because he tarnished the image of a woman, he called a woman characterless? Or is it Vajramukti, who established a relationship with this woman out of wedlock? Or is it the king who banished Padmavati from the kingdom? So it's a very curious question, right? Three people can be held at fault. One is a person who spread a slander or who tried to assassinate the woman's character, which is the friend, though it was for a good thing still. Then there was Vajramukti, who made a liaison with the lady, who established a relationship with the lady out of wedlock even before marriage. Or was it the king? Who was at fault here? The king who banished Padmavati without even questioning her. Vikram replied that it was the king who was at fault, because whatever the prince did was for love. The friend did for the prince, but the king did not even bother to know the truth and punished the innocent Padmavati. So the actions of the prince as well as the friend can be justified, because whatever the prince did, it was out of pure love. He loved Padmavati, and that's why he acted upon it. Now, the second thing was with the friend. Whatever the friend did was for his friendship with Vajramukti. So, since he was a good friend to Vajramukti, and since he had to solve this sad situation, and since he wanted Vajramukti to get married to Padmavati, whatever that he did can also be justified. And what is there in calling a woman bad names? Because in reality, if you know the real state of events, then nobody would try to slander her name. But what the king did is completely unacceptable, because he never even once tried to know the truth, and he punished the innocent Padmavati. Maybe if he had asked what had transpired, even Padmavati would have said that this is the reason I wanted to marry Vajramukti, but he never listened to Padmavati. So without listening to Padmavati, he took a rash judgment of banishing her from the kingdom. The king should always justify his actions, whereas here the king was wrong. So as a king himself, Vikramaditya was a person with a conscience. He was a conscientious king, and he knew where to take the right decision and when to take the right decision. And he said that as a king, king should always justify his actions. And here the king can be held wrong, because he never even once listened to what Padmavati had to say, and he never even once tried to evaluate the events. Bedar liked Vikram's intelligence, but once more Vikram opened his mouth to speak, and hence Bedar flew away. Now, this is a very interesting tale. It's a tale about moralities, and it has a wonderful riddle in between and all of that. It is a classic tale, and you can analyze this tale in relation with a narrative theory which was put forth by Vladimir Prop. Now, Vladimir Prop was a formalist critic. He put forth this theory in a book titled Morphology of the Folktale. Now, in Morphology of a Folktale, he analyzed the Russian folktales and he came up with some basic patterns that can be seen in these folktales. And there are certain characters which can be seen in the folktales also. So, in this particular tale, again, if I analyze it from the perspective of morphology of folktale, again, with narrative theory put forth by Vladimir Prop, this particular tale has a hero. The hero is on a quest. Now, the tale begins again. This is a frame narrative, so the tale begins with Vikramaditya. The Vikramaditya is on a quest to find Vedal and bring him back to the sorcerer. Remember the tale that is originally there. So that is the frame narrative, and inside that there is the tale which is recounted by Vedal. Now, in the tale recounted by Vedal, again there is a hero. The hero of the tale is Vajramukthi, and Vajramukthi has got a helper. The helper of the tale is none other than our minister's son and his close friend. So the friend acts as a helper in the tale, and friend also help him solve the riddles put forth by Padmavathi. So in a way, he is also a donor. He helps or offers help to our hero. So, using certain elements of his intellect and wisdom, he offers solutions to the hero as well. And then there is a heroine, and the heroine is a beautiful woman with wisdom, and that is none other than our Padmavathi. So, this again can be analyzed from the perspective of narrative theory. And it has all those narrative functions of a folktale, and we shall discuss it if we get another class. We shall discuss more about it in another lecture. So this is just the basic tale. Just go through it. It's a very unique tale, and you might expect certain textual questions from this tale, but apart from that, if they ask some theory based questions based on it, because since you are first year students, I don't think that they might delve deep into Vladimir Prop and morphology of folktale and the like, but I was just introducing you to the concept. The things that you need to remember is that you need to know what the genre of frame narrative is, because this tale is in the form of a frame narrative where Vedal recounts a tale to Vikramaditya, and the tale that is recounted by Vedal is told within the tale of the grand narrative of Vedala Panchavimshati or Panchasi. Okay, so in this way you can say that this is a frame narrative or a tale within a tale. I hope that this was a wonderful tale. I believe that you will be able to read this on your own, and you will be able to make interpretations on your own. But on the face value, this tale again deals with woman and the agency of woman in a home, and at that time women were given the least agency. If someone is branded as being as being a woman of loose morals, she would be banished from the kingdom without even asking her at what has transpired or what has happened for that matter. So this is again something that you need to take note of while reading this tale. I hope that it was clear. Thank you for listening. Take care.